Welcome. You have found the show we call Real Men Don't Cry, or Do They? This is a podcast for men. And on this show, we will hear real-life stories from men about how they have navigated the complexities of being a man in this modern day. We are going to look at the boys don't cry way of thinking and how that has influenced them and how they have risen above societal pressures to be true to themselves. The focus of this show is men's real-world experiences, not just ideas and theories. I hope that you will learn from what they have discovered and use it in your life as well. Let's get into today's show. Welcome to this episode of Real Men Don't Cry, or Do They? I'm Brandon Archer, and today I have Laverne Friesen, and I am loving how I'm finding guys to have on this podcast. And we started talking about it a bit before we hit record. I'm like, no, wait, we're going to stop. We're going to actually let people in on this. So welcome, Laverne. Thanks for being here, man.
Thanks for having me, Brandon. I'm happy to be here.
Yeah. So why don't let's start with just who you are and where you are in the world, and we'll go from there.
Laverne Friesen, former law enforcement officer. I live in Northern Alberta, Canada. 2 years ago, I was, medically retired from my career from a psychological injury. And now I am passionate about helping others find their own power and stand in that power and helping others heal. In doing so, I'm on a constant pursuit of growth myself and always healing myself as well.
Language, man. Speaking my language.
Okay.
That to me, dude, is how you change the world. That's how one man changes the world. So good on you. That's phenomenal. Let's share with people how we met, because we started talking about it and then we're like, whoa, wait, stop. So you are part of a mastermind group with Kevin McNee, who is, what's the title of it?
Heart Warriors.
I can't remember what Kevin called.
Yeah, Heart Warriors.
Right. And I came in and did a masterclass on masculine and feminine dynamics. And now you share a little bit on how that hit you and the timing and everything.
Yeah, so that was within a couple of weeks of a relationship ending for me. And it was the first relationship that I'd ever had in my life, with the exception of two of my grandparents. But it was the first relationship that I'd ever had where I had been shown unconditional love and unconditional support. And that relationship ended. It was a shock and it was a surprise. And then I sat through your masterclass on feminine and masculine in relationships. And it was an interesting time of reflection for me. And I was still in the mindset that I'd come out of this great relationship, and sitting through that class was just another piece of the puzzle that showed me it wasn't as great as I thought it was, I guess. And I had put that relationship on a pedestal because it was the first time I'd experienced love. And I thought it was so amazing. But really, that's just the starting point for relationships. Like that unconditional love, that's the base, that's the foundation, right? But that's all it is. You have to build on top of that, right? So it was a pretty interesting time. I think I left my camera off for a lot of it because kind of raw, had some feelings surfacing, so I wanted to deal with those, and I don't always want to show everybody that I'm crying. But yeah, it was interesting for me.
So what does love mean to you now?
Oh, that's powerful. Love is a verb. It's not a feeling. It's something that you have to work on all the time. Oh, love is for me right now, love is being willing to go into the dark places of yourself for someone else. So if I'm in a relationship, I am going to go and work on myself and meet the scary, I guess, demons inside myself for that other person. But I'm also going to do it for myself as well because I love myself and I always want to be a better person.
Right. I mean, you've shared so much in the first 5 minutes. Like, people are going to be like, damn, you guys are going deep quick. But, like, whatever. We're doing it. I love that definition. And I love how you said what it is for you right now. Because to me, that shows you're willing to allow it to evolve.
Mm-hmm.
And it has evolved to where you are today. What was love to you as a kid? How was that modeled? What did it look like?
I'm not sure that it was modeled for me. Um, I my childhood was quite chaotic. It was traumatic, little traumas and big traumas, and I didn't know what love was. And I grew up and as an adult, so I have very deep feminine wounding, and throughout my mid 20s, I didn't want a relationship. Um, I wanted the physical benefits of having a relationship, but I was terrified of any commitment. And I had very almost hateful feelings towards most women based on what I had been modeled for as a child.
Was that
And so
modeling from your dad, or was it just from your experience with your mom?
that's from my mom. So my dad was a farmer, a dairy farmer, and it's that's quite time consuming. And he was always working. And my mother was physically, emotionally abusive. And um, my earliest memories are a lot of screaming and a lot of violence. And so um, I do remember my dad modeling love for me, but as you age and the trauma starts to affect you, I became distant. And my dad never understood because as a small child, we'd had a close bond. And he was enabling my mother's abuse. And so I saw him as this bad person, or how could you? And so there are times that through I guess, the fog of the abuse, my dad's love shone through a couple of times, but he was dealing with his own generational trauma. And so he didn't have very many tools to deal with everything. And so, that helped, I guess, traumatize me as well.
Yeah.
I want to say something though. I Both my dad and I have done a lot of work on ourselves. And over the last couple of years, we've become closer. And a lot of that had to do with me forgiving him a lot. And so, partially thanks to Kevin McNee, I recently read my dad a letter that I wrote him. And it was 4 or 5 pages typed out. And I explained to him everything, how violent my childhood had been, all the abuse that I'd experienced, and how he had enabled my mom to be, or my mom's violence towards me. And he had been an active participant. But then I also explained to him, I realized how he had been manipulated by my mom as well. And I made sure that I told him I was coming from a point of love and forgiveness. And at the end of me reading that letter to him, the first thing he said to me was, "Thank you. It's all true." And then he hugged me. And then he told me some guilt that he's been carrying for over almost 40 years now, right? So very powerful. It's amazing what happens when two people can face their demons, right?
Thanks for sharing all that. That's incredibly vulnerable. And there's a couple angles where that hits me in the heart for sure. And I think it's important men share this stuff with other men, meaning like our relationships with our mom form who we are, and we don't talk about it enough. We don't talk about it enough. So thanks for being willing to do that.
Yeah, you're welcome.
What can you, yeah. Do you remember, is there anything that stood out where you realized, like cognitively realized, my mom's not safe, I need to just like shut down?
Oh, um, yeah, I don't know. There were things that she did when I was really young that I remember. I do remember a couple of times, one time in particular, where I came home from school and she accused me of doing something at school. And another boy in my class was the one who had done that, and he had gotten suspended from it. And I told my mom it wasn't me. Call his mom, she'll confirm like he got suspended, right? Or called the school. And she never did. And then she enlisted the help of my dad. And um, I received a very violent and ongoing punishment. And um, they kept taking breaks from whipping me to encourage me to confess. And I hadn't done it. So I didn't confess. And eventually, they just stopped whipping me. And I think that was probably the point in my life where I'm like, okay, like I don't want anything to do with my mom anymore. And I was only 9 or 10 at that point. Um,
Yeah.
and even into my late 20s, I couldn't talk about her without getting angry. Um, I'm 43 today, and my 41st, the Christmas of my 41st year, so a year and a half ago, was the first time that I allowed my mom to touch me and I didn't get a physical reaction. And that's because I worked on forgiveness. And she has never admitted any wrongdoing. Um, and she never will. She's not the type of person that would ever admit that. But I realized that I had to forgive her for myself and for my own peace. And I went through just a mental exercise of where I pictured her in front of me. I pictured the trauma that she had experienced in her childhood that made her who she was. And then I forgave her. And about 2 weeks later, I was home from Christmas and she wanted to hug me. And so I let her. And it was the first time in over 40 years where she'd touched me and my body didn't shiver. I didn't shudder uncontrollably. And so forgiveness is not about the other person. They don't want it. They don't care about it. They don't think they need it. But it gives us peace, right? So that's a big stage in my healing, being able to do that for her. And I've worked on that for the last couple of years, and I can sit and have a conversation with her now, and I'm not even disturbed. I recognize all the toxic things she does and she says, but it's just who she is, right? So it sounds selfish, I guess, if you don't understand it, but it's not about her. It's all about me.
What was there any time in your life where you didn't have any contact with her?
Yeah, in my mid 30s, for about 2 years, I blocked her from all form of communication. I may have seen her a couple times during that time, um, but I didn't talk to her. And I had to do it. I had to do something for my peace. Like, I would read a text or an email from her, and I'd just absolutely lose my mind. Um, Now, this is going to sound really crazy to people that don't understand it. I was sexually assaulted when I was a young boy. And then um, after I told my parents, I was brought back to the same place and it happened again. And my mom never acknowledged that my whole life until I was 35. And she brought it up in an argument. And the only reason for that is I was thinking, I believe she was using it to wound me in that argument. And I was unregulated back then and it worked. I saw red for quite a long time. And then I blocked her for a while.
Man, I didn't know any of this before we recorded this. And again, just thank you for being vulnerable, because men need to hear this. My mom is also not a safe person for me and wasn't my whole childhood and teen years. And I shut down. I'm like, oh shit, this is actually dangerous for me. And actually just and I went almost a decade no contact. And I actually went a couple months ago because I was healed enough, and just not even an olive branch, just knew that if I don't attempt to repair that relationship to some degree, it was affecting everything else in my life. And she said to me, I was pretty honest about some things, and she offered to me, I'm sorry I couldn't love you the way you needed to be. And I, of course, started bawling my eyes out, because that's what we desire. That's what we need from our moms.
Yeah.
Right. I don't need her to be perfect as an adult. I just need you to it goes a long way to own your behavior.
It does.
Because I don't see her as a god anymore. As kids, we look to our parents for everything. And now I see her as a human. And it's a very, very different lens. Very different lens. Because I, maybe like you, I was bitter and angry for a long time. Like probably 20 years.
Yeah.
And like you said, forgiveness is for you. I was torturing myself. For all those years.
Yeah. And it eats you up inside. It kills you. It's
well, and for me, I don't know if it's the same for you. It just blocked the possibility of a close relationship with any other woman. It was never going to happen.
Yeah.
Because of the defenses I had.
Yeah. Yeah, for the longest time, I had very short-term relationships. And very much designed so. But then I married my mom. In the sense of, right? The first lady that came along that showed me some love, or what I thought was love, because I had no idea. Really, the first person that came along and showed me attention is basically what it was. And that backfired in a huge way, because I'm sure you can imagine, with a traumatic childhood, you're filling your proverbial bucket of how much you can handle. And then I went into a career in law enforcement. And then, because that wasn't good enough, because I had this desire to help other people. I became a volunteer firefighter at the same time. And so there was a period of about 5 years where I was burning my candle at both ends. And I eventually couldn't take anymore. And it started off gradually. And, um, increased irritability, then lots of anger, and then bouts of just pure rage. And eventually I slipped into a major depressive episode. And I didn't understand what was happening. I just felt that my world was closing in around me. And I couldn't sleep. I was taking about up to 5 times the recommended dose of a sleep aid. And I would still only get an hour and a half to 2 hours every night. And so I became suicidal. I would lay in bed and I would plan out my own demise. And I had worked with guys that were in peer support, and they had always said, if anybody's struggling, reach out for help. And I never did. The closest I came is I began sending a text at 3 in the morning, and then I never sent it. And I believe now, and that's why I'm so passionate about helping people, is that the reason I didn't send it is because I never knew that they were a safe person, because they had never told their story. And that's why I tell my story, because I want to be a safe person. Eventually, so the stigma around mental illness and suicide is pervasive, and it's very strong, especially in the first responder community. And I was terrified of how I'd be viewed if I spoke up. So I didn't say anything. I was terrified. But there came a point when I was desperate enough. And so I tried to tell my ex-wife. And the message didn't get through. And I blamed myself. A few days later, I tried telling her again. She looked me in the eye and she said, I know. And then she walked out of the room. I know alone. I believe the only thing that saved me was at that time our daughter was 3 years old. And every single night she would wake up and she would come into our bedroom and she would cuddle up beside me and she would tuck herself in beside me. And I would be laying in bed thinking about how horrible my life was and planning my own demise. I knew how it was going to look. I already knew what was going to happen. And I would feel her body beside me, and I would feel the warmth, and I would hear her breathing. And I knew that I had to find a way to stay alive. And somehow I did. It was hard. It took me almost 2 years before I realized that I couldn't hide. And so I went and found a psychologist. And going to therapy was life-changing. Learned a lot of stuff about myself. Everybody needs to go to
Man, I'm
therapy.
glad you're here. I'm glad. Can I share something about what I heard when you shared about your daughter? This is a
Yes.
belief I have. So we come into the world basically perfect, authentic as fuck. We don't know any different other than to just be who we are. And when I hear stories of people's kids, like she was so authentic and she could feel another human soul. Like you got to take your brain out of this and go deep, right? And think with your heart. She felt a human soul suffering. She cognitively didn't know any of this. And she's just like, oh, I need to comfort this other soul. The fact that you were her dad had fuck all to do with it.
Yeah. It's interesting because
I think that's beautiful because we get so wrapped up in our heads for lots of different reasons. And here your child is just like showing you life.
Yeah, 100%. it's interesting because I met a contractor, showed up in my house one day to do some work, and ended up staying for 2 hours after the job was done so we could talk mental health stuff together. And he had experienced the same thing when he was suicidal. His 15-year-old daughter all of a sudden started asking to sleep in his bed with him. And he said that kept him awake or alive. Um, it's interesting because about a year ago, which is 7 years after this, um, I had my Akashic records read, and the lady told me, she's like, "You have a daughter," and I said, "Yeah, I do." And she's like, "You guys have shared many lifetimes together." And so, if you believe in that, and you believe in, your souls pick a journey or whatever, um, she was there for that reason. Her soul knew that I needed comforting, and it worked.
Yeah. It's, dude, this is like the human level shit. Like, in my opinion, I'd love to know what you think, having gone through a lot. I think the term mental health is I think it's medical based. I don't think it's accurate. I think it's more soul health, meaning, like, in your journey, your soul was wounded.
Yes.
And the
Oh yeah.
real trick is, like, how do you heal that soul?
Yeah.
Does that
A
resonate
hundred
with
percent.
you? Because there's just lots of talk of mental health, and I'm like, in my life experience now, I'm like, it's fuck all to do with mental health. It's like your soul is hurting so bad, and it manifests as these other things.
Yeah, I think so. I just had this conversation the other day. Like, I went to therapy and I had to learn a lot of things. But in my journey of growth, my therapist, my psychologist, who's very good and specializes in trauma, she could only take me so far. She
Yeah.
didn't, right? She dealt with the medical side of it, and then I had to get into my soul. And I believe that's kind of a journey that you have to do by yourself. And you have to want to do it. You can have others kind of guide you to there, but when you're going to go heal your soul, that's something you have to go do alone for the most part.
Uh, I tend to agree. But you touched on something like the psychologist could only take you so far. And I 100% agree. Like, it's kind of only a tip of the iceberg. I don't
Yeah.
know if you found that, but the actual
Yeah.
healing is not, it's actually hard to put into words.
Yeah,
It's
I
like
agree
I
with.
had somebody explain, it was regarding something else, but it applies to this. It's like trying to explain sight to a blind person. You can't do it. It doesn't make sense. You have to, like, get to a point where you're like, there's more than this. I'm not buying into this narrative of it's my mental health. And you just know, like, there's the little Laverne, there's the little Brandon screaming inside of us going, hey man, I'm right fucking here. And I need
Oh
you.
yeah. Yeah.
I
It's
need you.
interesting.
It's super
Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah, and so um there's kind of four big events that shaped my healing journey. I went through my mental health crisis. It was prolonged. My I went to therapy. I learned all the cognitive distortions that I was perpetrating. I learned how I thought, how that was hurting me, whatever, right? The basics. Um, then I went through a divorce, and that was kind of like I call it my accidental spiritual awakening. Um, I had a lot of anxiety. I was fearful that my ex-wife was gonna try to take the kids from me, take all my money. And I couldn't figure out how to do it. I found a video somewhere that said you have to accept it. Like, that's bullshit. But at the same point, I realized, wait a minute, like intuitively, I knew there was something there. And so I sat on my couch over 3 days and I envisioned the worst case scenario. And on the third day, amidst my tears, I accepted it. And as soon as I accepted it, my tears stopped. I was calm. I realized this could never happen. And so that was kind of my accidental spiritual awakening. And I began to believe in a higher power. Then in July 2022, I was at work, realized I just couldn't deal with the garbage and the shit anymore. I went to see my psychologist. He said, it's probably time you started thinking about doing something else. I got diagnosed at that point with generalized anxiety disorder. And that was a whole other journey. And then in January of this year, so not even 3 months ago, the person who I thought was going to be my forever, the person that has shown me, was the first person to ever show me unconditional love and support, ended our relationship. And that's where my healing journey took off. And I believe that I would be within my right, from mainstream society's point of view, to sit and grieve that loss of that relationship for a year, whatever, right? Within an hour of her breaking up with me, I wrote in my journal that I need to embrace this pain and I'm going to become a better person because of it. And I did that. And if I would have gone to a psychologist, I think they would have said, whatever, like maybe more superficial treatments. But I really embraced the pain of that heartbreak, and I felt it. I would be cooking supper and I'd be standing at the stove crying. My children would see me crying, and because I don't hide my emotions in front of my children, I let them see that it's healthy, and I would explain to them why I was crying, because I'm sad at this big loss, but I'm also happy at the new opportunities that it's giving me. I cried in the gym a couple of times. I don't care, right? You got to show your emotions. Granted, I'm not going to walk around weeping necessarily, but I'm not going to hide the tears either. And when you sit with that pain and you're not scared of it, you get clarity like I've never experienced. And so I was able to heal like the adult Laverne within a couple of weeks, because I saw, because of my journaling and sitting with the pain, I saw really soon like how this was just a really good thing for me and how this relationship hadn't been serving me. My inner child really started screaming for attention. And so one of the things I started doing was I would wake up. So I wake up 5 o'clock every morning and I meditate. But what I started doing was, after my meditation, I go for a walk around the neighborhood. And depending if I have my children or not, it might be a short walk or, a 45-minute walk. And during these walks, I would think and I would reflect, and emotions would come up or feelings would come up. And I'd be like, where the hell's that coming from? And I started realizing it was my inner child showing me some stuff. And wow, like things that I would not have come up with on my own if I wasn't willing to sit with that pain. And being willing to sit with the pain and just let it, just feel it. You start to understand it, or understand that it's your inner child. And man, there was things that I thought I'd healed already, that I thought I dealt with, um, things that I had to deal with a few times, and I would so now, or I started, and I still do, when I get these emotions, I run to my journal. If at all possible, I stop what I'm doing because I want to deal with them right away. I don't want them to have to come back. And I start journaling, and um, there's something there's something very relieving about tapping into that inner child pain and sobbing uncontrollably for 20 minutes, and just opening those taps and just soaking the pages of your journal. And I've had it where sitting in the seated meditation pose, and my jeans are wet and my shirt's just like stream, like the tears streaked. And but my emotions were suppressed my whole life. It was never safe for me to be who I was. I'm neurodivergent, so I'm ADHD. So growing up, I had big emotions. That's who I am. That's the way my brain is wired. But if I show those emotions, I got beaten. I got whipped. And so I never got to express my emotions. Now as a 43-year-old, I'm releasing all of those. And man, I've never been happier, because you're just so much lighter. You feel like you lose 20 pounds like every time you do it, right? Um, but just tapping into it, you get the clarity, you get the release. And I just wish I know how scary it is for other people that haven't done it. And I would never begrudge anybody for not wanting to go there to their inner child, because I know how scary that can be. But it takes more work to hide from it than to go into it. And it's just, and I can see you nodding. So I know you understand. I know you understand what I'm talking about. It's
Oh
just such
yeah.
a relief. Right. And to me, that's what
Well,
healing is.
have you looked? Fuck yeah, it is. Have you looked into in your journey childhood development and just the stages of our development and what we need from our caregivers? So I asked that precursor, and this is going to make total sense, and you're actually explaining it. Our moms are the ones that are supposed to show us at early stages our emotions are okay. It doesn't matter, happy, sad, angry. They're the ones that are supposed to, in our early stages, show us, hey, your emotions are okay. But when we have mothers that shut that down because they're wounded, it fucks with men so bad. And it's way more common than is talked about. Way more common. So it's no surprise that you're learning to literally reparent that 9-year-old, 5-year-old, all these different stages of little Laverne. He's allowed to be happy now. He wasn't even allowed to be happy.
Yep.
Right? So you've got
Yep.
big emotions, which I believe everybody has big emotions, to be honest. I just think it depends on how they were nurtured when you were a kid and what you were modeled of what's okay to show and what's not.
Yep.
And this is it. You are describing, in my opinion, the modern initiation to manhood. This is it. You have to learn how to reparent yourself. It's not a fucking 5 a.m. workout. It's not a Carl Jungian rabbit hole that people go down and have all this terminology that makes them sound really knowledgeable. That is not what healing is. You are describing healing. And it is challenging to explain. it is challenging because there's a degree of faith that comes into it. And I know you have men in your life that have modeled it. Until you see another man model what it looks like, it's really, really fucking hard to understand. Like, it's really hard.
Yeah. Yeah,
But
that's true.
if you are quiet and if you are honest enough with yourself to listen to your soul, he fucking knows. That part of you knows what needs to be done. And it's fear that keeps people from doing it. Fear of
Yeah.
the unknown, fear of those emotions. Well, subconsciously, you've locked down all these emotions over the year. What the fuck happens if I take the cap off of that? I'm like, yeah, you're going to cry. No fucking candy coating that shit. You're going to cry.
Yeah.
And at weird
Yeah.
times for no apparent reason. But your body is stored 40 years of ignoring it. And you're literally fucking robbing yourself of the man, the life that you want to be. And, you know, in my journey, it was a lot for me. Like, I had a heart attack. I almost fucking died because I ignored this shit. And then my kids, it's like, I got kids. It's like, Jesus, fuck, this is not just about me, but it's just about me. Meaning,
Yeah.
if I show up in the world happier, better, I automatically help my kids
Yeah. Yeah.
because we got modeled some fucked up shit. I want to model for my kids. Guess what? You can recover from that fucked up shit.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's been very interesting for me as well because my son, who's 7 years old, is very much like me. He reminds me of myself so much. And when I write letters to myself, I'm often thinking and comparing. So when I write letters to my younger self, my inner child, I write him a lot of letters. And I compare him to my son. And my son is, neurodivergent with those great big emotions. And I wasn't able to be a good parent to him until I began working on my inner child myself and understood him. And, it's, sorry, I've never heard of it. I haven't thought about it as reparenting myself. But parent, when I, when I'm the dad to my son that he deserves, I'm also the dad to little Laverne that little Laverne deserves. And being divorced, I've really had to tap into my feminine side because I wanted to provide maybe the more feminine aspects um, to my son and both my children as well. And my son has the dad that he deserves, and so does little Laverne. And it's been it's been a hell of a ride. That's all. And you're
Yeah.
right. It's difficult
But
to explain, and just to tell somebody, a random dude, say, "Hey, you got to tap into your inner child. You got to go journal, and you got to cry your guts out for 20 minutes." And while you're crying your guts out, you're going to be filled with gratitude because you know that you're completing a childhood trauma. You're now releasing those emotions that you weren't releasing, and you're completing that event from childhood. And now that event is not going to bother you as much. And that's a long that's a a long leap for most people. They have to go
yeah.
on a journey to get to that
And
point.
I mean, I did it. And I do wonder if it's just because I wasn't shown this path, because this path is it's out there. It's not easy to find. It's fucking not easy to find. And when I was searching for help, it's like the mental health stuff. It's like, oh, this makes sense because it's so mainstream. And then I think it helps you gain a little knowledge. And then if you decide, you go, oh, you can sense there's a deeper layer.
Yes.
So I don't know I'm debating whether somebody can go straight to this depth of work we're talking about. I really don't know if it's possible. It's just not my journey. It wasn't your journey. It's never been
No.
anybody I've heard's journey. It's usually like you got to understand it, and then you like see some patterns, and then you go deep.
Yeah. The one thing, maybe two things that the medical community or like my psychologist told me to do that really helped me were journaling and meditation. And meditation changed my life. Meditation is what eliminated all the anxiety from my life. But meditation's just one aspect of all the other things you have to do to kind of get you to that point.
Yeah, it's just a tool.
Yeah.
It's just a tool. Holy crap, man. I'm watching the time, and there's so much. Maybe we got to do a follow-up. We gotta riff on that after we're done this. I'd just like to ask you 2 closing questions, if that's cool with you.
Of course.
Message do you have to send to 9-year-old Laverne?
The first message I ever sent him was, "You're okay now." I don't know. There's so many messages that I've told him just over the last few months. But I actually, you know what? I've told him something I mentioned earlier, and that is, you're the parent that you always deserved. And that's what matters now. It matters that your offspring get the love and nurturing that you never got. And he's happy about that. Our children want to know that they dream about growing up to becoming somebody awesome, often important or famous. But my inner child knows that he's a good person. All that bad shit made him a better person. And he's okay now. And he's doing good by his own children.
And what message would you like to send to men listening to this?
Embrace your pain. Society has taught us that emotions are not good. I used to get angry and think I was a bad person. That anger was trying to tell me something. I used to hold in my pain until it exploded in a volcano, and I said things and did things that weren't good to other people. Just embrace the pain and feel it. Let it flow through you, and you'll understand it.
I know this podcast is going to help, guys. I know you were so vulnerable and real about your journey. I appreciate that. Thank you for that. You are also starting to help other men on this process. And in the show, you sent me some information, so I'll drop it in the show notes. But you're doing, is it a 12-week program? I think I saw.
Yes. I looking back on my life to where I was before I experienced my mental health crisis, and then through my mental health crisis, the divorce, career change, heartbreak. I thought back of all the things that I should have been doing, that I wasn't doing, that I'd been told I should be doing. And after this heartbreak in January, I put them all together and I started doing them for myself, and my life changed immensely. And so I developed a 12-week program that gradually brings people from where I was 7 years ago to where I am today. Into
Yeah. And I'm going to give you a plug. I don't know your program, but to men listening to this, I guarantee you, Laverne will be able to help you more than therapy. I guarantee you, because he's walked through it. And that for me is who I want to learn from. I want to learn from men who have actually had to do the work. And this guy is 100% one of them. So if his story resonates with you, look him up. I'm pretty sure he can help you out. Okay, Laverne,
thank you.
thanks for being here, man. And we're going to have to talk about doing a follow-up episode. Take it easy.
You too. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for taking the time to be here today. I honestly hope you found something you can use in your life. And I hope you found some relief in knowing that you're not the only one with challenges. We can be very isolated as men. If you don't have support in your life, please reach out to someone. It's okay to need help. It doesn't mean that you're less of a man. In fact, it takes a courageous man to know when it's time to ask for guidance. Until next time, brother.